Welcome to the BiggerPockets Money Show, show number 19.
It's time for a new American dream, one that doesn't involve working in a cubicle for 40 years, barely scraping by. Whether you're looking to get your financial house in order, invest the money you already have, or discover new paths for wealth creation, you're in the right place. This show is for anyone who has money or wants more. This is the BiggerPockets Money Podcast.
How's it going, everybody? I'm Scott Trench, and I'm here with my co-host, Miss Mindy Jensen. How are you doing today, Mindy?
I am doing great, Scott. I'm really excited about today's show because we interview Chad Carson from CoachCarson.com, and I just really enjoy every time I get to talk to Chad. He's such a nice person. He's so smart, and he's so giving with his information.
Yeah, I've known Chad for a number of years now, and just really impressed at what he's built and how he did it. He's just a hustler throughout his entire life, as evidenced by him playing Division I football at Clemson as a linebacker. And then obviously building this huge real estate portfolio from scratch after graduating. So really impressed with the guy. We're going to hear all about his story today. He's coming out with a new book, I think in August, which is going to be awesome, about how to retire using real estate investing. Just really, really excited about it. This episode is probably best geared towards folks that want to use real estate as a tool to achieve a lifestyle result. So Chad is, very outspoken about how for many of us, a small real estate portfolio that covers the basics, that provides more than enough, is plenty, and that there's a stopping point. You build your real estate portfolio, you achieve your desired amount of cash flow and wealth, and then you use that to design your lifestyle. A lot of people, when they hear about using in real estate investing or entrepreneurship, you get carried away and keep going bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and end up missing what they were doing this all for in the first place. So that's what I think you're going to really get out of today's show, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, he's a big advocate of focusing on the end result and, making a goal, hitting your goal, and then, stopping and taking a break and, look around and see, is this where you want to be?
Yep, absolutely. And without further ado, let's bring in Chad. Chad Carson, Mr. Coach Carson, welcome to the BiggerPockets Money Show. How are you doing?
It's awesome. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I know you've built an awesome real estate portfolio, living in a unique lifestyle that's been made possible because of that, and I'm looking forward to kind of hearing about it. So maybe we could just start from the beginning. What do you consider the starting point? When did you get the idea to begin pursuing financial freedom, and how did you kind of take those first steps to move in that direction?
Yeah, so my story begins right after college, I think, with financial independence. I graduated with a degree in biology and German, which has absolutely nothing to do with any of the stuff I currently do.
Let's take one quick second. Where did you graduate from?
I was at Clemson University, so go Tigers.
And what sport did you play there?
I was a middle linebacker, and I had a much bigger neck and big old shoulders at that point. So I guess that is the beginning of my story. I was playing football in college, and I got a college scholarship that paid. So I didn't have any student debt, which was awesome. And I graduated, and I was actually thinking I was going to go in the NFL for a split second, and the reality of like NFL and how good they really are kind of brought me back down to earth. And so I started thinking, all right, what do I want to do now? This is kind of exciting. Let's figure it out. And I thought about med school. I actually applied to 5 med schools. I thought that was sort of my natural path because I was just interested in that, interested in science. Also thought about business. Like a lot of football players got recruited to be like investment bankers and people like this in these intense kind of financial positions that paid pretty well. So I thought about that too. But then my dad had rental properties growing up, and I always hated the rental properties, actually, kind of come to think of it, because back in middle school, he and my brother and he would drop us off at a foreclosure house he bought in Georgia during the summer. And it'd be like 95 degrees. The refrigerator would be full of old food. There would be like mice running around in this vacant house. And he would say, all right, boys, I'll be back in 3 or 4 hours to pick you up, clean this house up. And
that's why you have kids. That's why you have kids. Exactly. Slave labor for your real estate empire.
Yes, exactly. We were horrible labor. I can't imagine how he got any kind of return on this effort or time. But we complained about it, and who would ever do this? And then when I graduated from college, I was just sitting at home, kind of thinking about what to do. And I picked one of the books off the shelf. Oh, Dad kind of knows what he's talking about. He was actually buying rental properties growing up, so I had the benefit of a good example of entrepreneurship. I think that's something a lot of people don't have. And so I decided that, you know what, I don't have any college debt. I own my car free and clear. I could sleep in that if I had to. I'm just going to start investing. And so I had a buddy of mine from college. He graduated a couple years ahead of me, and his father had owned mobile homes growing up. So we had kind of a similar background and interest, and we decided to start investing in real estate. And that was it. I got started with that as an entrepreneur, not really investing, but I was a bird dog finding deals for other people, beginning with my father and then continuing on. I moved back up to South Carolina. I was originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and I moved to South Carolina. My business partner and I started buying and selling houses, finding deals, eventually owning rental properties. And that was sort of my, the financial engine that took me the rest of the way.
Can you maybe go into a little bit of detail about how you prepared yourself financially to buy those first few rental properties? Like, what did you do on the personal finance side of things, maybe outside of the real estate strategy piece, to get access to those first few deals?
Yeah, I think the lifestyle is one of the most important parts of it, because in my first year, I lived in my parents' house. So I made a little bit of money, finding deals for them. But then, I was just living at home, living cheap. And so sort of began this pattern of just living frugally, which I know from hearing other guests on your show, that's not an uncommon type thing. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to save almost all my money the first year. The second year I was in business, I started with my business partner, and I just lived in his spare bedroom. He had this, I didn't realize he had this extra room in his house. And I walked in there one day and there's boxes everywhere. And underneath the boxes was a bed, this old single bed. And I was like, can I sleep on this bed and stay here for a little while? So I kind of bummed off of him for another year, and we lived off ramen noodles, and it was awesome. We had a good time. And then, those 2 or 3 years of we didn't have any rental properties at that point. And really, it could have been any job. It was just an entry level entrepreneurship job, but it was even worse than job security at most jobs. If I made $30,000, it was all at one time, 6 months into the year. The rest of the time I was kind of just eating crumbs and living off savings, that kind of thing. And so I think that kind of attitude of, as an entrepreneur, there's no guaranteed cash flow. Like, that was just instilled in my brain really early on. Therefore, your lifestyle has to be flexible and resilient, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And like fast forwarding down the road, like 2007, 8, when everybody had some hiccups. If you were in the real estate game and you owned properties and you're buying and selling, 2007, 8, and 9 were pretty difficult. But I think having those early kind of lifestyle type, cushions made it so that it wasn't as big a deal. We were able to tighten our belt. We didn't use most of the earnings that we made, and now we were able to sort of kind of keep that margin really high on our lifestyle.
So was that first purchase in 2007, 2008, or when was that first purchase in relation to when you got started, and how much money did you have to bring to the table for it?
Yeah, so we began in 2003 and just doing the wholesaling and that kind of thing. And then 3 years later, so 4, 5, 6 probably, 2006 was when we really started holding properties. So 2006 and 7, we actually bought a really good number of rental properties. Most of those were owner financing type purchases. And that kind of goes back to my particular story, which I don't think is normal for everybody, but I wasn't at a W-2 job. I had good credit. But for me to go out and get mortgages and get my 5 to 10 mortgages was just not it wasn't in the cards. It wasn't my what the strength I had. I was really good at finding deals, and so I had to get really creative with the financing. Both with seller financing was a pretty good source of the deals that I had, and then also private money. So I had just people with self-directed IRAs, other people who just had some money in the bank. I built relationships with them over time. And so they would let me buy the properties. And to answer your question, Scott, I didn't have a lot of cash early on in some of those rental properties. It might have been, $5,000 on the first rental. It was like a $100,000 purchase, $5,000 down with seller financing. That was like one example. And I had several deals like that afterwards. So, it was just mainly from saving some of the flips. So I'd make $20,000, $30,000 on a flip. And then we'd live off of some of that, save a little bit, build up some reserves, use about $5,000 or $10,000 for a down payment, and then start building those kind of on the side of our flip business.
So you were bringing almost no money to the deal. You had a partner. Did your partner have a job? Did your partner you said you had good credit. I thought you had to have a job to have good credit.
Well, I really didn't have any credit early on. I had like one credit card, one credit card in college. And, so I was just paying a credit card. That was basically all I had. And my business partner was a little bit better off than I was, but not much. He had an internet business. And in 2003, like having internet business was pretty much like, what does that mean? It was not, the ad revenue wasn't as good as it is today. It's actually done a lot better for him now. But at that time, he was just making enough money to sort of pay. He owned a home. He was able to pay his bills and kind of live for like a $30,000-$40,000 a year lifestyle. That's sort of what his internet business did. So between the two of us, our partnership was basically like a labor partnership. Like we split up the labor of this flip business. We said, all right, Chad's going to go find the deals and he's going to work on getting the financing. And then as soon as we bought the property, I would pass it on to my business partner. He would work on managing the rehab, remodeling it, fixing it up. He would also manage getting it usually flipped. For us was a kind of a typical early on scenario. So he would kind of work on those two parts of the business. I would work on the other two. And we just had sort of like an assembly line of two people just kind of hustling and making the deals work. And over time, that's evolved a little bit. Like his other business has gotten much more busy and was much more lucrative. And so he spent a lot more time and became more passive in the kind of day-to-day management of properties, whereas I was the person who would manage our rental properties that we have. Eventually we hired hired some help to do some of the kind of day-to-day work. And I've never done any contracting work. Like I'm not one of those handy people who knows how to fix anything. Like Carl and Mindy, you guys amaze me. But I'm really good at making a punch list. I'm really good at figuring out the vision for the property and then hiring other people to do it. Just write checks, which has kind of served me well back to financial independence because it wasn't much of a transition to stop doing all that because I never was doing all the kind of in-person stuff. So if I'm long distance managing people from abroad, where I am in Ecuador right now, for example, it's not much different than when I first started. I'm just picking up the phone, calling somebody and saying, hey, can you get that done for me?
Where are these properties located and how was it going through the recession there when you said you got started in 2006, 2007?
Yeah, so we're in South Carolina, and our main holdings were in the upstate of South Carolina. So you have like the lower state with Charleston on the ocean, and we're kind of near the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, and a little small college town. And so when we first started, we were just buying like single family houses, and kind of in the area, families would rent them. That was sort of our normal kind of rental. We also kind of evolved because we're in a college town to doing student rentals, and so our niche primarily, this started off with a house hack for me. Like I lived in one unit and rented out 3 other units. So I'm the house hacking club. Join you guys. But the main thing for us with student rentals was like these lower price kind of student rentals. We would buy like a duplex, triplex, quadruplex. And in a college town, you have sort of this range of rents. You have like the upper end rents are people like these luxury housing, people with like these big, huge pools and clubhouses and expensive kind of nice finishes, like a luxury type apartment. That's kind of the top end of the market. We were trying to find the grad students and the students who are going to stay there for 3 or 4 years and get a degree as a PhD student or something, or an international student. So we started finding that little niche of people initially through my house hack and then through some other properties. But the issue we had, going back to your question about the recession, was we were sort of in our growth mode where we're buying and flipping properties, living off of that, using some of the flip money to buy rental properties. But as most people know, like rental properties don't make a lot of money early on. You're leveraged. We were leveraged for sure. And we actually grew too much in 2007. I actually got too good at finding deals. Like I was getting really good at sending direct mail out. I got really good at getting referrals coming in. I just had lots and lots of leads, and I was good at getting better at negotiating with different kinds of seller financing, creative financing. And so we found ourselves in 2007 in the position where we had 50 closings, like acquisition closings in 1 year, like 2007, right before the thing, everything hits the fan, so it's kind of comical now to think about that. And so we did some things well, and we did some things not well. The things we did well, like I said earlier, we were pretty disciplined with our lifestyle. Like it didn't change from college lifestyle. And even though we're making the hundreds of thousands of dollars flipping houses the year before that, we weren't spending more than we did when we first started off. But the other thing we did well is we saved a lot of that money to put it aside as reserves, just because we just a little bit, I don't know, maybe we were paranoid, maybe we just didn't know what was going to happen. The thing we didn't do well, though, I think, was getting undisciplined with our fundamentals of buying assets. So we bought some properties where, oh man, the financing's great. This is seller financing, or this is a 3% interest rate, something like that. But yet the location was horrible. Like it wasn't going to attract great long-term tenants. It didn't fit into the business model of what we were trying to do. Or we bought some properties where we underestimated repair costs, those kind of things. And a lot of those aren't abnormal for somebody getting started. But it's kind of come to me now that if you grow really fast, really early, everybody's going to make mistakes. But if you go really fast, you're actually going to compound those mistakes, and they're going to bubble up even more. And so that was a mistake we made. We had a group of properties. They weren't majority of our properties, but they were a group of properties that either had negative cash flow, were not good tenants, and it took us through the recession and then a couple of years after, and we even still have today a couple of those properties, to get rid of them, to deal with those problems. And so we used up a lot of our reserves, or we ate into those reserves, both dealing with the recession, just people losing their jobs, tenants turning over, kind of that normal kind of stuff. And then also just eating some of the mistakes we made, just having to spend cash to pay for those mistakes. And so we survived it though. And I think going back to why we were able to make it through the recession after growing and making some of those mistakes was living inexpensively, saving money, and also these relationships with private lenders that I've mentioned, like instead of having like local bank commercial loans where if they think you're overextended, they could call the loan due. We went and talked to private lenders and to our seller financing people, and we didn't have any balloon notes. We didn't have any kind of things where we had to pay all the money back right away. It was just, all right, we've got these properties. I know you're reading the news right now that things are kind of bad, but we're going to still keep paying make our payments. We're still getting rent. Things are kind of a little bit tough, but we're going to be fine. And so it was not a pleasant experience, but it wasn't like a disastrous experience for us either.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that one of the best things you just said was you had reserves. And one of the most common questions that we get on BiggerPockets forums is, how do I start investing in real estate with no money? And then bad credit is usually part of that too. And, there are ways to get into real estate without using your own money to purchase the property, but you do need some sort of way to pay for the repairs that always come up. Something breaks every time you buy a house. Like the next day, there's something that's broken that's like not even noted on the inspection report, and that's like Murphy's Law rules real estate. And having those huge reserves that you didn't touch, is really, really, really important. And I want to just make sure people hear that and realize that you made it through in an over-leveraged situation by having this huge set of reserves. You didn't just spend all your money. I mean, you had 50 closings in 2007. You could have probably easily had more if you would have just spent all your money. So that's really important I just want to highlight that part.
For sure. Yeah. And it's just like your personal life, like I think everybody hears in their personal life, they're supposed to have some kind of cash set aside for a rainy day or for an opportunity. And your business it's the same way or even more important. And I think back about it, the reason we really felt that those reserves were important is because I felt an obligation. I wanted to make a profit and I wanted to survive, but it was more like to these people I'd made a promise to being leveraged. They were individuals that had loaned me money. They were including, like my grandmother was my first private lender. Like my grandmother, she wasn't my first. She heard about me paying 10% interest to these private lenders on some of our flips, like at Thanksgiving dinner or something. She was worried about me. She's like, you can't be paying 10% interest. That's ridiculous. You're going to lose your shirt. And then the second thing she says, well, wait a minute, can I loan you money to make 10% interest? So I had these individuals like her, like other people whose retirement was depending on us doing well for them. And so having reserves is a way of ensuring that you can keep your promises. And I think that kind of did it for me as much as anything. But it's just a good habit to get into, because I think the main thing I've learned about markets and about ups and downs is that if you think you can predict what's going to happen next, you'd be the first one. I mean, Warren Buffett, some of the smartest people in the investment world, call people who try to predict markets, not any better than fortune tellers. People reading your palm or something. And so that's something that we all need to take home and think. And so instead of trying to predict what's going to happen, try to be resilient and flexible with whatever's going to happen. That applies right now in 2018 as well. It's like, what's going to happen next? We can make some guesses, but if you want to be flexible, you got to hedge with cash reserves, with quality properties, with fixed interest loans. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do as a financially savvy person to hedge for those next steps. And then it just comes down to personal, want to. And I think I didn't mention that a lot, but the fact that if you're willing to hustle, if you're willing to, go when it gets tough, go 80 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week. If you're willing to, do that extra step, that's kind of that entrepreneurial hustle muscle, the people that, you just got to use it. I mean, and that you can't account for what kind of results you can get by doing that. I remember listening to David Green's interview with you guys, and I was like, yes. I mean, when he was hustling in college, when he was hustling early on, I mean, that's a wild card. That served me so well in football. That was a thing that I had a little bit less talent than a couple other guys I was competing with, but that hustle and that want to and that desire is just amazing. You can't underestimate what it does, particularly when things go badly. And that's kind of when that resilient, that are you gonna just back down from it, or are you going to actually step up, do what you have to do, and make it happen? That's sort of the way it works in a down economy as well.
I love that philosophy because I would even add one more thing into that. I mean, you mentioned a couple of things that were reducing your risk there: the cash reserves and the hustle. I'd actually add two more things that I think also probably helped you reduce your risk, maybe even unconsciously, and let me know if I'm wrong here. But first is the spread between your cash flow and your expenses with the property, not just your cash reserve, but the fact that you're, even in a down market, hopefully you're at least breaking even or even having a small positive cash flow, just slightly less positive cash flow than you had previously. The second one that I would add in there would be education. The more educated you are, the more, and maybe networking as well, the more people you know, the better educated you are. I think that can go a long way to reducing risk as well. Some of these things.
Yeah. I mean, so I mentioned a couple of negative cash flow properties, but there were some positive cash flow properties as well that kind of brought us through there. So if you win 3 and you lose 1, I mean, in the end, you can still do pretty well. So you're right on with that. And education is absolutely in network. I mean, education, even if it's something you already know and you listen to a podcast and it just kind of confirms what you are, kind of the path you're already on, it gives you hope. It gives you like, oh yeah, I could do that, or that could work, or yeah, I'm going down the right path. And I had a lot of that. BiggerPockets was a big part for me of just being on there and knowing other people are going through the same thing you're going through. That's really big. And for me, local networking and local meetups were really helpful. I had some 2 or 3 kind of private investors who we knew each other well. We went out to lunch or coffee every once in a while. They knew what we were working on, and so having that trust and that confidence with a real person is something that brings you through. Like that, one thing that makes me nervous about having a long-term portfolio in real estate of all bank commercial kind of debt is that you kind of lose that person-to-person relationship that you have with partners and with private lenders. And so I'm not saying that bank debt's bad, but I know for sure in our case, having those people that you could reach out to and say, hey, here's what we're doing. We didn't have any really, really bad situations, but if they'd gotten bad where we had to refinance or we had to extend the loan, or something like that, talking to a real person and having that relationship with them is a much different proposition than going to the bank and saying, hey, can you extend my loan? And they say, no, pay us our money. That's just the bottom line. And I had friends who properties in 2008 because of that exact phenomenon. There was a guy who had $1 million+ equity portfolio, these rentals, and he owed about $500,000 to the bank. And he couldn't get refinanced. There was a balloon on the note. He had to get it extended. And they wouldn't do it. They needed their money because they needed to pay their creditors back as well. And so he ended up losing the properties. He sold them before the foreclosure or something like that. But the point is he lost, a bunch of equity because of relationships with the lender. And I think that's something for people to think about, kind of not only your reserves, not only your cash flow, but who are you, if you do have leverage, what kind of leverage do you have? What are the terms? Who is it with? Those kind of things can make a big difference in whether you can be resilient in the next, up and down.
Okay, so I've got some questions here. You studied, what was it, German and
Biology.
biology and German. Okay, so what sort of financial education did you have as a kid? I didn't speak I don't speak German. I didn't study German, so maybe they talk about finances a lot there, but like you're very financially savvy, but you grew up in America, going through the American school systems where they don't typically teach a lot of financial education. Did your parents talk about money? I'm so impressed. I keep coming back to this one point. I'm so impressed that you didn't spend every dime that you had from your flipping business, and that got you through. I mean, the 2008 crisis was really, really, really bad, and so many people lost their shirt, especially real estate investors, because prices were so high. So, where did you learn how to do all this?
I think I'm gonna borrow another Warren Buffett phrase. Is I won the Ovarian lottery in terms of just being able to observe. My parents didn't. But they made good money, so I came from like kind of an upper middle class or good money kind of background. But at the same time, that doesn't guarantee they're going to talk about money. But my dad was an entrepreneur, was a real estate investor, but he had some failures. Like he had some businesses that did not work, and I think that was the most educational thing to me was just seeing how an entrepreneur kind of has to be resilient, has to keep going, and he would come home at the kitchen table. My mom and dad were business partners, and they would talk about it and the good and the bad stuff. And that was so helpful for me. It kind of informed my own ideas about how to discuss things with my kids. I have a 5 and 7-year-old, 2 little girls, and not only with money, but just like everything. Are you struggling with something? Are you having a challenge in your business? Like, don't hide that from your kids. That's a really big educational experience that they get to be at the kitchen table, seeing mom and dad or whoever, if it's just mom, if it's just dad, talking about this is really helpful. So that was helpful for me, observing. Also, just getting, just seeing mentors and seeing other people. Like I think I had one of my early mentors was a professor at Clemson, and he kind of took me under his wing, and he was teaching a business class, and he told me about real estate investing, how he was looking at rental properties, and so I asked him if I could just ride around with him, and so I rode around with him while I was taking classes and kind of looked at what he was doing, and he told me a story about when he was 20, about my age. He was like 22, 23 years old. He was working for this guy who was obviously pretty wealthy, like he's this boss or something like that. And the guy said, "Hey, Louis, you want to learn how to become rich?" And Louis like, "Yeah, I'm 20. I want to learn how to become rich." He's like, "All right, Louis, here's what you got to do. Right now, you're making $30,000 a year. You got to learn to live on $30,000 a year. Got it, Louis?" Louis, "Oh yeah, I got it. Okay. Next thing you got to do is you got to learn how to make $60,000 and still live on $30,000. Got it, Louis? Yeah, I got it." And then he kind of kept on going with the story. Next thing you got to do is learn how to make $120,000 a year. You still got to live on $30,000 a year, Louis. You got it? And he kind of like was driving it in. He's like, I got it. All right, good. And he said, if you can do that, Louis, then you can't help but become rich. And it was like, a light bulb for him. And I remember him telling me that story, and also reading like The Millionaire Next Door, some of these other books. It was just, all right, that makes sense. That's rational. That makes, you live off less. You create this gap, which is in the financial independence community. It's like, that's the core fundamental. You just build this big savings rate and you live inexpensively. But then on the other side, you try to make more money. You try to get good at making money and just create this big gap between the two. And so I think that story hit home. Also seeing my parents who made good money, not living that high on the hog, those are both pretty informative for me.
So I love this story. This is exactly how what you just said earlier about how you just were able to observe these things and pick up, oh, that's obviously correct common sense that I'm going to follow and apply. Like that's how I feel about how doing things. And I think our stories are similar in the sense that we both started this kind of pursuit of financial independence, or just like really good habits of financially immediately out of college as kind of young, maybe single folks that just kind of applied those things. Why didn't other people do this? Why doesn't everyone else do this right out of college? Because we know that it gets a little bit more difficult. You have to make some changes and maybe roll back that lifestyle later on. But it's so easy if you just start and apply this immediately after graduation before that lifestyle creep kind of hits them.
Yeah, I think part of it's culture, which is one thing I love about BiggerPockets. Is like I think what you're doing and we're doing is creating this culture of people who value these things. And so it's kind of like the Dave Ramsey show, where he comes on the beginning, says this, I forget exactly what his phrase is, but he's like, the BMW is not the status symbol of choice anymore. It's having debt paid off.
Yeah, the paid off mortgage.
Yeah. The paid off mortgage is the status symbol of choice. Well, like
Yeah.
for us, like a savings rate is the status symbol of choice, or the freedom and flexibility is the status symbol of choice. Like we when you flip your priority levels and your values of a culture from I want to go get this house and I have this dream house right out of college and I deserve that and I earn that. This is me. Like that's a cultural thing. There's nothing built into that. This is something that says you can choose to have that priority. But even better is if you can be around a bunch of people who also have those priorities. You can listen to podcasts who have those priorities. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to make those choices, and you're going to have your crew of people who are kind of doing the same thing you do.
Okay. It's not an intelligence thing.
No, I don't think I was more intelligent. I think it was hanging around people who are doing it.
You're much more money smart than other people. So kudos to you for not getting distracted by my waving of my hands. You said, I deserve this. No, you don't deserve it. If you can't afford it, you don't deserve it. If you didn't, why do you deserve a big house? You don't deserve a big house just because you got a job that pays you $10,000 a year more than your last job. You don't deserve a brand new car just because, if you've got a car that runs, if you've got a house that covers your body and shelters your body, I guess, fits your needs. You don't deserve a bigger house. That's not why you buy things. You buy things because you need them, and you don't need a bigger house. Who needs a 10,000 square foot house? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. And there isn't one person that I've spoken to on this show or at FinCon, which is, the financial media conference, that have recommended spending every dime you make. The story about, what was his name? Sonny?
Louis.
Louis.
Yeah, Louis.
Sorry.
Louis. Louis.
The story about Louis. Live on $30,000 a year. It doesn't matter how much you make. If you can live on $30,000 a year and be happy, stay there. Everybody who comes on this show talks about how frugality is a part of their financial independence path. And frugality doesn't mean living with nothing. I think that's really important to point out. A lot of people are like, oh, I could never do that. I could never give up, insert luxury item here. But you don't have to give it up. You don't have to give up, the things that are really, really important to you. Give up the things that don't matter. Like, what kind of car do you drive when you're at home?
Toyota, 2000 Toyota Avalon. We have one car now.
One car for 4 people. How can you possibly live like that? Don't you feel deprived?
Crazy. I know. Well, we've been living here in Ecuador for 15 months without any car, and I'm kind of dreading having to go back and drive it. This has been really nice.
I didn't realize you'd been in Ecuador for 15 months.
Yeah, I can't believe it either. It's just kind of flown by. But yeah, we came here in January, one year, and then now it's May or April, and so yeah, we're coming back in May, and it's I think my story here in Ecuador, but also going back to 2007 and the kind of downturn. There's something else I forgot to mention that was probably the biggest aha for us that had to do with frugality, has to do with happiness, was that when we got so big and we were growing and buying and selling and doing all this stuff, it was really a wake-up call. And I have to credit my business partner because I think he was more attuned to it. I was just, let's go buy some more. And he said, well, wait a minute, let's kind of step back and think about why are we doing all this? What are we actually trying to accomplish in our lives? Is this business serving some goal? And we're like, oh, wait a minute, we had basically kind of borrowed goals from listening to other people. It'd be like the equivalent of listening to a podcast and somebody says, yeah, we bought and sold 50 houses this year. And the other person listening says, I want to do that too. That was kind of like what we were. And there's some value to copying goals from other people or modeling other people. But at some point you have to kind of own your own, destination. And so for us, we looked at it and we said, we're busy, we're buying and selling houses. Let's just write down what would we do if we had all the money in the world? If just you waved your magic wand, money was not an issue. Right now, and also 5 to 10 years from now, what would you do differently? And for me, for both of us, we love playing pickup basketball for 2 hours in the middle of the day. Now how much does pickup basketball for 2 hours in the middle of the day cost money-wise? It's free. We could just go to this gym and play with these people. But what other things would limit us playing basketball for 2 hours in the middle of the day? Buying and selling 50 houses per year. And so it was like that, what are we doing? We're not even accomplishing our goals. And as I met my wife, who would become my wife, and we started thinking about our own goals, it was about travel. It was about starting a family. It was about spending time together. It was about learning. It was about growing. was about a lot of other things. I love business. I'm never going to stop doing that. But there were these other things which money can't buy. That was like the biggest aha for me. And so that's sort of where I started thinking about this real estate business as a more of a tool in a toolbox, and not letting it become this like all-encompassing dominant thing that controls your life. And I think I've noticed that with myself, and also with a lot of other real estate entrepreneurs, is it can take on a life of its own. It can get its own importance. And then you can kind of manufacture goals to support this idea that you need to have this big business that's taken over your life. And you can say, I want another 100 deals. I want another 100 deals. When really, you might have 5 properties, and that might do exactly what you need for your life. And so that was like such a big aha moment that I think a lot of people need to hear somebody else say that, to say, it's okay not to be the biggest, the fastest, and all that, because your life and what you define as important for your life is the most important thing. And the money in the business is just a tool for that.
Yeah, I think of that every time I read on the BiggerPockets forums. I want to have 1,000 units. I'm like, why? How much, how much money do you need? And I think this comes back to my frugal background and frugal nature. I'm a grandchild of the Great Depression. So my parents, both come from huge families who ran through the Great Depression, and they didn't have any money. They never spent anything. I don't want all of these. I mean, that's 1,000 properties is a lot of people you have to deal with. I don't want to deal with that many people every day or every month. I mean, how many checks can you cash? How much money do you need? And this whole I want it all isn't really the best choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm glad there are like, capitalist mavens who like take over the world. I'm glad Elon Musk is like a workaholic who wants to send rockets to Mars. Like, I'm really like excited that there are entrepreneurs in our system who want to go for it. But like, my point would be like, if you want to buy 1,000 units, do it because you love it. Like, do it because you want to build this thing that is just this is like your purpose in life, to build 1,000 units, because you know what, you can live just fine on 10 units. I mean, it's just saying. So if you're going to buy 1,000 units, just make sure you got the right reasons. I'm not criticizing anybody who wants to get big and do that, because that's awesome. That's just really cool, and it's cool to see that people are doing that. But on the other end, there's so many of us who don't want to become like this real estate entrepreneurial, like, empire builder. We just want to like spend more time with our kids, or we want to travel to Ecuador and learn a new language, or we want to go, take a break for a while and take a mini retirement. And that's okay too. And there's a huge variation of what is defined as success. But success can, on the surface, can seem like more, better, faster, when that's not the case. And financial independence is such a unique individual thing. And we've got to start with that, which I did not when I first started. I just let the business control it, as opposed to starting with the life goal and then working it backwards from there.
Well, let me chime in here. I'm 27 here and still kind of working out what my life's going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years. I don't know that. Versus, you guys have families and kind of know exactly where you're at and what you kind of need to get to that desired end result there. So like, what kind of advice would you give to someone like me who's like, I'm building for this future that's a little less certain than maybe that what you guys have already got here? How do you kind of determine a number there or end goal for your business?
Right. Yeah, I was in a very similar situation where, it was undefined. And in many ways, my own future is undefined too. So I'm 38. And I don't know what I want to do when I grow up either. But yeah, the thing is, like, financially, like I borrowed this term from some non-real estate financial kind of thinkers and bloggers, where you try to have like on 2 different goals. Like, one is like an income floor. Like for me, like I always had an income goal. I want to make a certain amount of income every month. I want to have real estate pay for a certain amount of income to cover my basic expenses. And so let's just like choose a number. Let's just say like it's $5,000 a month. And let's say you want to have your real estate cover $5,000 a month. So when you get to that level, maybe that's your like, or my family can live very comfortably on that. Or if your number's 10,000, your number's 10,000. But there's some number like that. When you get to a place where you have your portfolio producing that much income and is stable and is resilient and is safe, that's a really big milestone. Like that's sort of like the peak of financial independence in some ways. You've done something well. But the other thing that the kind of note was, and that I learned for myself, was there's a bunch of plateaus. Like as you're climbing towards that kind of that big plateau of having that income, you might get $1,000 a month, and then $2,000 a month, and then three. You've got these milestones. And for me, so my recommendation to people in their 20s is, yes, like shoot for these big goals, like long run. Like I want to have this big number, but also realize like that's on the peak of the mountain. That's like way up there. And if this is a mountain climb, it's going to take a long time to get there. Even like a short climb is 5 to 10 years. That would be really quickly reaching financial independence. And so like take your time, push it really hard for 2 or 3 years, take a break. And for me, like I would take these mini retirements where I would take 3 months at first, sometimes 6 months. Right now we're 16 months, 15 months, where you sort of detach yourself from your lifestyle. And this is like super hard for me to do because like as soon as I get into my groove and I'm going, and maybe some of the other, go-getters like me are like this, it's really hard to step back from that go-get-itness and say, you know what, I'm just going to like detach myself and kind of make myself get out of the bubble I'm in right now. And every time I've done that, that has been the best kind of life-centering, goal-orienting thing I've ever done. Like I went in 2009, like in the midst of the recession, I took a mini retirement. My wife and I went for 4 months. We started off in Spain for 6 weeks and kind of roamed around there. And then we went to South America, to Peru, Chile, Argentina, and just kind of had our backpacks and went along. And I remember physically, it was like 4 or 5 weeks in Spain, and we were sitting in this little fishing town called Cadaqués. It was on the Mediterranean coast, just this lazy little fishing town. We were just sitting there like all day, like reading a book, walking, eating good food. And by the end of the day, like I had this physical sensation, like a knot, like untying in my chest somewhere. And I was like, wow, this is just so relaxing. And, 6 months or 6 weeks before that, I would be like, I'd be bored stiff, like sitting there and just thinking and reading and reflecting my life. And that doesn't mean like I didn't get back into the entrepreneurial game after that, but like having that moment to sort of take yourself out. Like I had so many insights about which direction I wanted to go with my life. I had insights about what I did and what I didn't want to do. And so I can't recommend that enough. Like whether it's every week, take 1 day where you're just completely off. Every year, take, a month off. Every 3 or 4 or 5 years, take, 6 months off. It's just like a natural rhythm. Like we're not meant to be these machines who just go for 20, 30 years and then retire. Like we are more built for these like go, stop. And it not only makes you a better investor, a better entrepreneur, it helps you realize like what your priorities are. And so I did that some, Scott, and that was sort of on accident at first. And it was super helpful. And as I continue, I plan to just do that habit the rest of my life, because life is just one big climb, right? You're always having some kind of goal to go for. And then you're enjoying the scenery around you. You look around, smell the flowers, have fun, enjoy it while you're also climbing towards these really cool, ambitious goals.
I love it. I got to try one of these trips. The last time I did a trip like that was after college. I just spent all my money and did not relax going around Europe. So
you did it wrong.
Yeah.
No, it's all good. Whatever floats your boat.
Awesome. Well, maybe we could transition here. I know you had some things you want to talk about, in related to kind of these practical early retirement tips that we kind of discussed in the pre-interview. Do you want to kind of maybe move into those things, into that area now?
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be good. I mean, I sort of touched on one that was sort of kind of a core philosophy for me is try to, number one, if you have a goal for financial independence, particularly using real estate, but really any kind of vehicle, work it backwards from your lifestyle or your life. Like what's important to you, what matters to you, like what would an ideal day, what would an ideal life look like? You're not going to figure that out in like one sit down, and it's always going to be evolving, but you'll at least maybe identify some things you don't want to do in financial independence. And I think that's important. And then you also eventually, maybe you'll have something to move towards. Like for me, real estate investing is always going to be kind of part of my story. But for me, traveling was something I wanted to go towards. Being more, once I had kids, it was like, oh my gosh, this is, I've got to spend more time doing this, being there for them, especially early in their life. And so that was something I wanted to move towards. And then, once you had that, whatever it is for you, then you build your financial plan around that. And so I went back, I talked about the income floor, like just set a simple number. And this, it doesn't have to be like really exact. I think sometimes we get so kind of wrapped up in the details of these future kind of dates, which are they're out there. We can figure it out. And so if it's $60,000, if it's $30,000, if it's $100,000 a year, just pick a number that it excites you and that you think is going to do pretty well, and then you start building a plan around that. And that's what I think BiggerPockets is so awesome for. And I'm actually writing a book for BiggerPockets about this topic of how do you use real estate to kind of move towards that particular goal that you have. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but some of the ones that I can talk about, some of the ones I really like, for example, are, let's just say you work it backwards and you say, all right, $60,000 per year, $5,000 per month is kind of my number. And what would that look like for a real estate portfolio? And you might do something really simple. You might say, look in your area, and you realize that I could buy a duplex or a house that rents for $1,200 a month, let's say. And let's say that each one of those houses, when you pay all your expenses, taxes, insurance, maintenance, capital expenses, vacancy, everything, you have about $600 left over every month on each one of those houses, right? And so the question would be, how many houses do I need to own and have them? Let's just think of a real simple scenario. I had them paid off, free and clear, no debt on them, because that would be a really resilient, flexible portfolio to have in an early retirement. What would that I would have those properties paid off. How many properties do I need at $600 a month to meet my goal? Did I say 600? I think I made my math hard here. 600, 5,000 divided by 600. What is that? That's
let's say 500.
Yeah, 500.
Yeah.
500.
You got 10 properties. Yeah.
All right, 10 properties. I was supposed to do 10 in my head, and somehow I got 600. But anyway, 10 properties would be your work it backwards. You say, all right, I'm starting with 10. All I need to do is buy 10 properties and get them paid off, and I've made $5,000 a month, and there you go. And so I think that kind of starting point, you started with your life goal, you get to this practical real estate goal, and then the only question is like, all right, what do I need to do next in order to buy those 10 properties and get them paid off? And that's where all these tactics and these wonderful things you learn on BiggerPockets about debt snowballs or just paying cash for properties or trading up. There's so many different like routes up the mountain you could use. But if you don't have some sort of kind of destination you're going towards and have a general strategy, you'll sort of do what I did, and you get off balance and you say, all right, I need to go do all this craziness instead of just being pretty focused on a strategy and then figuring out tactics that can get you there, because tactics can get you distracted if you're not oriented towards some kind of specific goal. And I think that'd be one of my main messages, kind of as a practical tip for early retirement, is to think about what that orientation is for you. And particularly real estate is pretty simple. I mean, the math's pretty simple there. You just figure out what an average house would make after all expenses, and you just work it backwards.
I want to counter an argument that I know people are thinking right now as they're listening to you say this. Well, what about when my expenses go up? How do I know that 5,000 is going to be enough for me? Well, 5,000 is what it's bringing in today, but rents go up, prices go up, or house values go up. So your inflation, remember back to Louis, who can live on $30,000 a year all the time. You've covered this, you've covered it really well, and now your inflation is going to go up with your expenses too. So I think this is a really great basic lesson in how to cover your living expenses with real estate. I mean, it's really, I hate to make it sound so simple, but real estate really isn't that hard.
It's not that complicated. Yeah. And the other thing I would say is like, get to those goals first and then worry about some of the other stuff. Like I'm certainly worried about inflation. I'm certainly worried about the uncertainty of the future, but let's take care of first things first. Like your life is the first thing. So why not reach some milestones? Like get that income, and then let's start thinking about it. And one of the things you can think about if you're worried about 60,000 not being enough is you can start moving from like just rental properties to more quality rental properties. Like once you reach a destination where you have $5,000 coming in, this is an example that for me, like I had some trailers and I had some little mill, they call them mill houses in the South, but these old textile mills from the 1920s. These are the cheapest houses you could buy in some little small towns in the South. But just because they were cheap didn't mean they were the best properties to buy. And so we've been in the process ever since 2007 and 6 of replacing some of these properties. You sell them, you do a 1031 exchange, or you just pay the taxes on them, and you replace that with a better rental property, or you use that money from that bad rental property the equity to pay off a good rental property that is a long-term keeper. And those long-term keeper properties, if they're in a good location, in a general region where the population is increasing, where the economics are good, where there's diverse industry, the chances of you keeping up with inflation are pretty good with a basic little single family or small multi-unit kind of portfolio. So that's like one way of looking at it. You might hedge your bets just with that little portfolio. But the other thing that I do personally is I don't want to just depend on that. I'll also have a parallel, in the background. Once you've achieved that goal, you can also own some other properties, or you can have your self-directed IRA invested in real estate or not invested in real estate. This isn't your only thing. This is just like your foundation. This is your income floor that pays for your lifestyle, that does this. And then you have some other, like I have some leveraged investments. I have some properties that are still leveraged today, and I'm fine with that, with long-term mortgages. And those are like my inflation hedges. That's, down the road, those will pay off. They'll continue to grow. I've also have a self-directed, I have an IRA. Some of that's invested in real estate notes where I've loaned money to other investors. Some of that's just invested in a passive index fund in the S&P 500 or the total stock market. So there's some ways you can build some resiliency and some long-term flexibility in your whole portfolio. But the first point is get there, get to a point where you can start worrying about that stuff. Because right now you're working a job and you're using your whole life, all your time, the most valuable asset, working. And if you can get to that point where you have some income coming in from real estate to pay for your lifestyle, then you'll have all sorts of time to think about it. You can start flipping some houses. You can start, doing some other stuff. But very few people get to that point where their income is actually paying for their lifestyle, and that's the big deal.
Yeah, I wanna pull back from here and talk about Joel from FI 180 had this amazing quote. We met him at Camp FI in January. Scott and I did, and he said, "What's the worst that could happen? I have to go get a job. My worst case scenario is everybody else's everyday life. What would be the worst that happens if $5,000 doesn't cover your bills anymore, and for some reason you couldn't buy any more real estate? You can go get a job at Starbucks or McDonald's or wherever you can find a job. Go get a job coaching football, maybe."
I would love that. That'd be cool.
I'll put in a good word for you.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so I mean, your worst case scenario is not really such a bad thing.
Exactly, and that goes back to what we talked about earlier during the downturn. When you and I and all of us are so much more resilient than we give ourselves credit for, and I think particularly when you're in a job that makes the better money you make and the more secure your job seems, the more difficult it is for you to have that kind of entrepreneurial security. And that's why I think real estate is the ultimate early retirement plan and financial independence plan. Is because it's entrepreneurial. It's half business, half investment. It's not just you sit back and just wait for the stock market to do its thing, which is fine. That works too. But with real estate, you are building your own skills. You're building your own knowledge, your own skills, your own ability to find deals, your own, and so for me, I tell my wife sometimes, I was yes, I read these other blogs about, figuring out all these spreadsheets to make sure we never have to run out of money and do all this stuff. I said, that's pretty interesting intellectually, but I'm really not that worried about it. I just, to me, those big portfolios that can support you the rest of your life are kind of like an insurance policy, because I don't count on ever, if I needed it, I'll go get the football job, or I'll be a bookkeeper, or I'll be a, whatever. I have so many skills as a real estate investor that I've learned that you could go apply. And it's just you have so much ability to generate income and do things. And why worry about it? Like Joel said, I mean, it's at some point you just got to live your life and go do it.
Well, it's almost like your challenge that you kind of discussed here isn't worrying about whether your portfolio will sustain itself. It's you've built this massive portfolio. You know exactly how to go about starting from scratch and building a multi-million-dollar, I assume, net worth with thousands or tens of thousands of dollars a month in cash flow. I assume you hit a target and maybe have surpassed it. I don't know the specifics of your portfolio. Your challenge now is I need to stop trying to build towards the 500 unit portfolio and get my mind out of that and into more of enjoying life. It's almost like, if I ever had that problem even come up, I could easily go back and just adopt that mindset again for another few years and build, another huge surplus over and above what I need. And it's because of the skills. It's because of the four things that you mentioned. You're spending much less than you're bringing in. You're hustling. You're learning everything you can and figuring out how to do this the right way.
Yeah, and the other thing is once you free up your time, like what I found for myself, at least personally, some of my goals I had, like I wanted to start writing, I wanted to start teaching, I wanted to start doing some of these things, and those were like not financial hobbies. Like I didn't plan on making money with those, but over time, I mean, if you get good at this stuff, like everything starts making money. Even the things you don't, not everybody's like mission in life is to do something that's going to make money, but like if you teach, if you write a blog, if you these things that were like start off as hobbies. That's your post-financial independence goal, those might make money too. And maybe you're just being a parent. I know that's like a number one job, right? Doing that is like awesome. That doesn't pay you money, but I've seen moms and dads who write about that and share their information, and that somehow made some money too. So it's not like we have so many opportunities out here that whatever your hobby is, whatever the thing you do post-financial independence, that could turn into a little business, a little side hustle business as well. So I'm just blown away by the opportunities and like the stories I hear of how many people are enjoying their lives and living their life and doing it because they've created this space of time. And that's what I didn't do at first. And I think a lot of people are stuck in. You're working. You don't have time. And that time is like, that's where we want to invest our life. And that's where all the cool stuff starts happening.
Love it. Well, should we get moving on to our famous four here, or is there anything else that you wanted to add before we make that transition?
No, I think you guys have covered it. Great questions, and thanks I appreciate just being able to be here and talk about it.
Awesome. I'm so glad you came on. I love talking to Chad. I only get to see him once a year, and it's never enough.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so now we move on to our famous four questions. These are the same four questions. We can't count. They're actually 5 that we ask every person that comes onto the show. The first one is, what is your favorite finance book?
Yeah, I mean, the classic for me that sort of shifted my mindset was Your Money or Your Life. Vicki Robin. And so that is that I think the main concept in that book was this concept of enough. They had this curve they put in there where you make more money, you buy more things. There's sort of this peak of the curve where you might not even realize it, but that's where you like have the highest ratio of satisfaction and life happiness for money made or time spent. And you start getting over that, you start buying the extra big house, the extra car, the extra vacation, and you start getting more cluttered. And so that concept just like blew me away. And so that sort of led to me thinking about, these different currencies or money and life and mobility. And I think 4 Hour Workweek was another one that kind of talked about that. But Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez, that was an awesome book to read.
Yeah. The concept of enough needs to be more understood in our consumerist lifestyle today, or lifestyle? Consumerist society. Yes. Sorry.
All right. You may have answered this second question already. You touched on a couple of mistakes that you made, but what was your biggest money mistake? Which of those, what do you think was the biggest mishap you had?
Yeah, I'll zoom in on that mistake a little bit more. It was getting careless on the numbers in my case. I'm pretty nerdy about running numbers in real estate, but I got careless on some of the negotiation. You get in a negotiation, and I think this maybe is the tip, is that it's difficult to have like your numbers brain and your negotiation brain on. They're like there must be something like deep down in the roots of our brains somewhere, because it's really difficult for me, at least, to think about objectively the numbers when I'm sitting face to face with the seller, or I'm looking at this house or this multi-unit property that's exciting, and you get excited about it, you get emotional about it. And so I think both of those can be useful when you're negotiating, because I think when you're connected with the person sitting in front of you, when you're authentic and when you're a real person, that really helps you as a negotiator. But that's not the place to make the best decisions, I've found. So I kind of had to separate those two, where you think the numbers are the numbers, like it's just like a cold, hard fact whether those numbers work or not. And then the negotiation is another thing. And so for me, separating those two and not making the mistake of getting too into the deal, too emotional, too attached to it, and letting the numbers speak for themselves. And that was a learning lesson for me.
Awesome.
What is your best piece of advice for people who are just starting out? Scott kind of covered this already when he asked, what would you tell me to do?
Yeah, I think go back to the culture we were talking about. Like, if you're just starting out, it's going to be easy to get wrapped up in borrowing other people's goals and borrowing other people's ideas of success. Particularly, it's going to be like a family thing. Some of your family, some of your maybe things you just hadn't thought about are going to tell you what you should do. Buy that big house, do this next thing. And I would just challenge you to sort of to pick your own role models. Like pick them not only based on whether they look like they're doing well financially or something like that, but look at like how they're living their life. Like, is that the kind of lifestyle, or those are the kind of values you also want to aspire to? And then model some of the values, model some of the habits they have, and then build your own path around that, because it's so easy to get caught up in a lot of the things that don't serve you and that are going to are going to lead to bad decisions financially. And so if you can get it right in your 20s, I mean, if you can house hack once or twice, you can save some money. I mean, you are set for life. Somebody wrote a book about that, didn't they?
I've heard good things about that book.
You can retire on real estate. Someone wrote a book about that one too.
So, the 20. If I could talk to every single college kid and just evangelize house hacking and some of those kind of core things in Scott's book, I mean, it would be like change the country, right? So that's the message. Is just don't get caught up in it. Read Scott's book and you'll be good to go.
Yeah. I like what you said. I like what you said a few, like almost an hour ago, about how as soon as you graduated from college, you just continued to live like a college student. Some of the most successful people I know, some of the most financially independent people I know, did that very same thing. I mean, 1 year out of college, what does it matter if you're still living like a college student? That's what you're used to. That's what all your friends are doing, except the one guy that got the really great job and now has the super cool apartment in downtown and, is driving the 7 Series. But then, he's not all that happy.
Yeah, have roommates. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't you house hack? I mean, you just went from a dorm room where you were stacked on top of each other to now you're in your 20s. I mean, just go buy the house and bring the roommates in. I mean, that one move. If you didn't have to do any other real estate move your whole life, if you just did a house hack or two, I mean, it would change.
It's millions of dollars difference.
Yeah. It's a huge difference. So I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. And that, your housing, all the statistics show your housing is about a third of your total expenses. So if you don't want to cut lattes, but you do want to save a bunch of money, I mean, housing would be the number one thing you do. And you could, particularly if you're in a high price market, it's even more. It might even be like just a survival mechanism to do house hacking if you're living on the West Coast or Denver these days or other kind of hot markets. I mean, you just might need to do that just to make sure you can save some money. So that's a big one.
I house hacked back when it was called having a roommate.
BiggerPockets has made a name, so it works even better.
Nice. All right, this is the most difficult joke of the famous four. Or this is the most difficult question of the famous four. What is your favorite joke to tell at parties?
Oh man, that is tough. That is, gosh. Sometimes it's like physical jokes. I'll just dance or something. Then people will laugh. Look at this tall. I'm in Ecuador in Latin America now, and so there's just something about a tall gringo dancing and kind of just getting out there that just makes everybody laugh anyway. So maybe that's it. I go to an Ecuadorian party and they play some good music and look at the big tall gringo dancing. That's funny. So I don't think I'm very witty otherwise, but I can go break it down on the dance floor. That works.
Fair enough. Well, in that case, I'm going to read off a joke that Danny sent us here.
Uh-oh.
All right, and it's very complex. Let me see if you get this. All right. 2 men are on opposite sides of a river. The first man shouts to the second, "How do I get to the other side of the river?" And the second one says back, "You are on the other side of the river."
Oh, man. Yeah.
Sorry, I had to do it. I love that joke. Thank you, Danny.
Somebody posted in the Choose FI group that listening to Scott's jokes must be the most difficult part of Mindy's job. And I said, it is.
That's why I laughed for you, Mindy. Then you didn't have to do it. Right?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Chad, where can people find out more about you?
I've got a couple homes online. One, I write at BiggerPockets, so you can find me on the BiggerPockets blog, and I have Clemson Investors, my username at BiggerPockets. So reach out to me, say hello. And then CoachCarson.com is my personal website, and I write every week. I have articles on this kind of stuff, early retirement, using real estate to retire early, I wrote on stoicism last week. I get into all sorts of kind of stuff related. Anything I can roughly relate to financial independence and real estate and how they cross over, that's my little niche. So welcome to come over and check me out there as well.
Awesome. We will link to all of that in the show notes at biggerpockets.com/moneyshow19. Chad, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we say goodbye and let you get back onto your very busy day of doing nothing in Ecuador?
Oh, thank y'all for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure. And I just, this community and what you guys are doing and the people who are listening to this, you're doing the right thing. You're climbing, you're looking to achieve, and you're probably going to have people in your life who are telling you that this is not the kind of right stuff to focus on. But I think my overarching message that I want to take away today is just that, money, it's okay to focus on money as long and if you kind of associate that with the rest of what's your goal in life? What are you trying to accomplish? And that's an awesome ambition. You're taking care of one thing that's taking time away from everybody else, and that's an awesome ambition to have. So keep going for it.
Awesome. And then everyone should know that Chad has finished his latest book for BiggerPockets. We're going to give a little tease. I think we teased it out a little bit today, but we're going to be interviewing you again, I think, in a month or two for the BiggerPockets real estate podcast, where we'll go into that in depth, I believe. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, can't wait. So it was a process that I think you both told me this about, that it was going to be. I think you didn't tell me the details on purpose, but like the last 2 weeks of finishing that manuscript, it's like, oh my God. I've had my wisdom teeth out. I've had other things, but it was awesome, but it was painful.
I think I have in writing evidence that I had told you exactly how difficult it was going to be, particularly in the last few weeks.
Yeah. And I think my response was, oh, it's going great. I've got plenty of words already written. This is awesome. And then I got feedback from other people saying, wait a minute, that chapter are no good. You need to like throw those out and rewrite them. I'm like, oh God. All right, let's do it.
I can't imagine anything you wrote would be not good.
Yeah, I just high standards. It's got the BiggerPockets mark on there, so I gotta like live up to all these other ones that have come before me. So,
So when does your book come out? Do you have an approximate?
We're tentatively August 23rd. So that's the rough date, and so about a month before FinCon, so that'll be fun. And then the topic roughly is early retirement or financial independence, early retirement, and real estate, and how those two kind of intersect, and how to use real estate as a tool both to grow your wealth, and then also once you get there, how do you turn it into income? How do you sustain it? A lot of the stuff, some of the stuff we touched on today, that's what I really dug into and tried to show some best practices around. So can't wait to share it with everybody.
Perfect. Yeah, this is going to be an awesome book. Very excited for it to come out. All right. Well, Chad, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and your experience with real estate, the ultimate retirement plan.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Great to be here with you guys.
Okay.
Thanks, Chad.
We'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
All right. That was Chad Carson from CoachCarson.com. Really a great interview. What'd you think, Mindy?
I can't even, like, he just gives such great information all the time. And, the thing that I really, really, really want to point out just one more time is that investing from a position of large reserves to cover anything that life brings up for you, and setting a goal, having an end result, and once you get there, figure out, is this really where I want to be? Sometimes that is exactly where you want to be, and then look to where else you want to go. Look to the things that you want to do in your personal life. It's not always about just how much can I acquire.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic that he overextended in 2007. He did. He overextended. He bought too many properties. The fundamentals wore down, but he was able to make it through and rebuild from a position of strength because of his lifestyle choices and the fact that he ran a lean operation, both personally and professionally, from an expenses standpoint. And that was able to tide him through even a couple of weak decisions in that. I mean, it all comes back to the foundation of this all. The first pillar of phi, whatever we want to call it, is this lifestyle expense category. And if you keep that low relative to your earned income, it sounds like you can weather a lot of these different storms, even if you make a couple of bad decisions in the other areas of personal finance.
Yeah, it sounds like he's really figured out, like Louis, he needs to live on less, make more and live on less, and just be happy with that. And he really is. It's a great great story and so many lessons to be learned from this episode.
Yeah, and really looking forward to reading his book. I know he just finished it and is going to go through the editing process. So you and I will probably have the exclusive privilege of getting a pre-read on it before it goes live. We will put a link to where that book is going to be launched in the show notes, but we do not have it as of this time of this recording because it's still several months out from. It hasn't even gone through editing yet. But we will have all of that information for you in the show notes by the time this goes live. So check it out at BiggerPockets at BiggerPockets.com/moneyshow19.
Yes. So at the end of the show, we would like to ask you to help us out. We need more bad jokes so that Scott doesn't hog all of the bad jokes here. We need yours. You can send your jokes to Mindy at BiggerPockets.com or Scott at BiggerPockets.com.
Yeah, and tell me, when you do send those along, make sure that you give me permission to use your name when you do them. Otherwise, like Danny today, I'll just have to give you the first name shout out because I can't identify you without your permission. So if you do want your name read on the show, just give me a quick little, hey, you have my permission to use my name on the show if you use this joke or whatever.
Perfect. Okay, Scott, shall we get out of here and let our listeners get back to whatever it was they were doing? I'm sure they're getting to work right now.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. For the Bigger Pockets Money Show number 19, this is Mindy Jensen, over and out.